Hi, this is Taylor Kane, founder of Remember the Girls. You can hear my story in episode 110. In the meantime, enjoy this new episode from Kyle and Sean.
Welcome to the Two Disabled Dudes podcast. We believe life is about how we react. All right, everybody, welcome back. Sean, I want to jump right into it and follow up on the one thing that we talked about last week. What was your one thing? Remind me.
My one thing was getting back in the habit of keeping score on myself with what is called the weekly rhythm register.
Yeah, tell us what that is if you can briefly.
Sure. So Darren Hardy is the author of the book Compound Effect, and that's where it's really highlighted. And the whole idea was or is to keep track of your daily disciplines or habits so that at the end of the week, you're proud of the work you've accomplished, whether it's in your business life, personal life, or whatever it may be. So I've adopted a weekly rhythm register for my personal home life of, just daily activities that I believe to be important to complete every day, such as exercising or journaling or things of that nature.
Yeah.
Like one of the things on my register is eating vegetables every day because
Nice.
I'm not a vegetable guy. And I know if I don't have that in front of me as a score, then I'm never, I'll eat vegetables once a month and a salad or whatever. So,
Right. So how'd you do this week?
well, I actually meant to add up my score for the week, but I forgot. I haven't done that yet. I'll do it today. So I can't give you a score, but I can tell you that I've actually am making progress, which is the point. So I still had a bunch of zeros throughout the week, but I also earned a lot of points throughout the week for doing what I said I'm going to do or doing what's important to me. So I'm proud of the fact that I got in the habit of daily looking at that scorecard and keeping track. So I'm rebuilding that habit.
Well, I think it's really valuable just to track it. Like, you don't know where you're at all unless it's written down, right?
Yep.
And so even if you didn't do everything you wanted to, at least you know where you're at.
Yep. So anyway, you talked about getting back in the rhythm of connecting with your realtor and making progress in shopping.
Yeah.
So where were you at with that?
Yeah, so, my big long-term goal, right, is to own a condo, to buy a condo, and I've been looking for a long time, and I called my realtor this week, and I was like, dude, all right, how do we do this? What's the next step? And he's like, really, what we can do is wait for the right one to come along, and I think that's what it takes sometimes, right? Like, I think we're so used to being able to take action in every case, and that's important. But also, we need to realize when, patience is necessary, and I think that's what it calls for in this case. The key is to continue to hone in on what we're looking for, so when it appears, we are going to know.
So with that, I think it's valuable to share with our listeners. Today, at the point of this recording, we have to cut it short soon.
Oh,
Because why?
thank you. Because I'm going to look at a place tonight. So that is a potential place for me to buy. So, yeah, it's very exciting.
So with that, let's jump into our interview. We recently met Katie Wright and heard her story of a life-changing diagnosis, and we're honored to have that conversation and share it with our listeners today. So here is our conversation with Katie Wright. All right, Katie, we've been looking forward to having you on the show for, months. Our dear friend Gene Campbell helped us get connected to you, and we're glad we finally got you on today. So, Katie, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. I'm very much looking forward to talking with both of you. I love your podcast, and I really appreciate you having me on.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thank
So,
you.
are you a Team Sean or a Team Kyle kind of listener?
Oh, I don't know. I don't choose teams.
Oh, that's
Diplomatic
fair.
response.
Well, Katie, one of the things, we've talked once, for us and the sake of our listeners, what is your connection? Like, why are we having you on the show today? What brings you and the VEDS movement into today's spotlight?
Well, I think, one of the things that we're really trying to do is give VEDS its own identity and raise awareness for this condition, which is life-threatening. And I think, that's one of the reasons why we're on is it's like this invisible disability that is life-threatening. And it's really important that people know about it.
So with that, can you explain VEDS?
Sure. Yeah, VEDS stands for Vascular Ehlers Danlos Syndrome, and it is a connective tissue condition that results from a genetic defect in how your body produces collagen 3. And collagen 3 is very important in kind of, providing stability to the walls of the arteries, to the skin, to the intestines, the lungs, like it's everywhere throughout your body. And because of this defect in how your body produces it, you're prone, as somebody with VEDS, to life-threatening arterial ruptures, dissections, including an aortic dissection, but really across the body, medium to large size arteries just spontaneously tear. And that also goes for the intestines. And, you're also prone to lung collapses, and all of these things just kind of happen suddenly or with minimal trauma. So, and it doesn't have a treatment or a cure right now. And it's very, very rare.
So tell us a little bit about your experience personally.
Oh man. So I did not know that I had VEDS until I figured it out when I was 27 years old. And then it took me a couple months to convince somebody to test me for it. So it wasn't until I turned about a month after I turned 28 years old, I found out that I had this genetic condition that I had been living with my whole life. And at that time, I really felt like very, very alone. It's rare and it's hard to meet somebody with it because, sometimes you're the only person in your city. So I really just started trying to get involved in the community and like raising awareness. And I felt like it was so important because up until this point, I was in a lot of pain. I didn't know why. I had this neck pain that was just sticking around for about a year until I got diagnosed. And that pain turned out to be a dissected artery. So it was like I was just living with this dissected artery and in a pain management clinic because I didn't know I had a dissected artery. And because I didn't have this VEDS diagnosis, they never looked for one. So it was just crazy. And so that's really what got me involved was this like, this should not happen to anybody else, Like I just didn't want anybody else to go through that. And I felt like it was really wrong that I had. So
what's the implications of a dissected artery? Like, what does that cause? Holy cow, that sounds pretty like life-threatening.
Yeah, it can be. So I was lucky in that I did not have a clot really that formed from that. But what happens is you have 3 major layers to your artery walls, and when a dissection occurs, the inner layer of that wall kind of tears off and it creates this like flap. And it can also cause like a bubble. Like in my case, it caused a bubble in the artery, which is called a pseudoaneurysm. And that can be life-threatening if it ruptures for sure. And with the dissection, you can also form clots. You can have strokes and really serious things from that. And I didn't have my first mini stroke until months after I found out I had a dissected artery, luckily. So
how do you fix a dissected artery like you had, or is it fixed?
Mine's not fixed. I am not terribly familiar with the ways to fix the dissected artery.
Mm-hmm.
But I know that in VEDS, typically what people will do is they'll monitor it and make sure it doesn't turn into a pseudoaneurysm and it doesn't grow and it doesn't, pose a risk of rupture. Because with a rupture, you're like you're bleeding out basically internally, and that's not good. And they'll also make sure like it's not clotted. So I think there's a couple different things that can impact whether or not a surgical procedure is necessary, and will also impact what kind of procedure that will be. It might be, it's just, I don't want to go too far into that because I'm not a doctor. But I mean, there are some implications, mostly I think monitoring and making sure that you're not forming clots or that you're, not losing blood flow in that area either.
So our podcast, as you know, thank you that you've listened to a few episodes, but it's about living beyond circumstances. And so you're given this circumstance. This is what is happening in your life, in your body right now. What do you do with it? How do you take action against what is happening to you?
That is a really great question. It was absolutely devastating to get that diagnosis. But at the same time, it offered answers to my life that I didn't have before. Now all these little things in my life made sense that really made zero sense before. And I took that and I decided, like I said, I didn't want anybody else to have to go through that themselves. And so I started with a YouTube channel, and my goal for the YouTube channel was to raise awareness and just kind of share my story. But it started turning into more than that. People were reaching out to me after some time and they would say, "Oh my gosh, I have this. I'm so glad I found somebody else with this." Or my brother is in the hospital with this, or my niece just died from this. And that really made me start to realize that I wanted to share other people's stories as well. So I started my own podcast in 2018 called Staying Connected. And that's where I talk to other people about their stories with VEDS specifically. About, I don't know, maybe 9 months after I got diagnosed, I got involved with this research collaborative called the VEDS Collaborative. And that was a research project started by an investigator at the University of Washington with a goal of really involving patients, patient advocacy groups, and researchers together to kind of move research forward in this condition. And then ultimately, like, everything just snowballed into this wonderful journey where all of a sudden I'm, starting this VEDS movement with the Marfan Foundation.
Yeah. The thing I really love about your story is that, I feel like people are like, all right, I'm going to become a director of the VEDS movement and I'm going to like spread awareness and make a super huge impact. But that's not where it starts. It starts with just like, hey, I want to connect to other people that have this condition. So I'm going to create a YouTube channel. Like, that doesn't sound like a solution, right? But it's definitely the start. And that's how things get started. And just taking steps and building on what you've got.
Yeah. When I started that in 2017, I had no idea where I was going with it. There were multiple times where I was like, this is just kind of imposter syndrome. This is dumb. I don't know why I'm doing this. And then the more people reached out to me, the more it became this thing that I could not stop doing. There was no way that anybody was going to stop me from doing this. And then getting involved in meeting other people and researchers and just people who are really like behind the cause, and growing that network has just been an incredible experience. But back in 2017, no idea that's where I was going.
Yeah.
So you talked about, or you barely mentioned that VEDS is coming out of Marfan.
Yeah, so the VEDS movement is a division of the Marfan Foundation, which we consider a related condition. So people with Marfan syndrome, most people who are familiar with Marfan syndrome know that, their aorta typically grows and then dissects, and which is life-threatening. So, they have the Marfan Foundation started this years and years and years ago and have really done wonderful things for Marfan syndrome. And I got connected to the Marfan Foundation through the VEDS Collaborative, and we really connected very well. And when they decided to do something for VEDS, to give it its own identity separate from Ehlers Danlos syndrome as a whole, they brought me on to direct what is now called the VEDS Movement. So it's very different in the fact that with VEDS, people get monitored on a regular basis, typically for new dissections or things that might need intervention in order to avoid it becoming a life-threatening emergency. But there's really no predictor yet that we know. Someone can have a clean scan on, no new aneurysms, no new dissections, everything is appearing stable, but they can still the next day have a life-threatening emergency with one of their arteries that really wasn't visible on that scan. So, and because we don't know really the way to prevent those things from happening, it's a much, much different condition, I think. So it's really, it's really crazy. It really is. And I don't, it's like you, as somebody with VEDS, you never really know when something's going to happen. You live in this world of spontaneity where things can just happen. And, you can follow these exercise guidelines, which are wonderful, to really kind of try to prevent those things, but it's not 100%, which is why we desperately need something that makes it 100%.
How do you remain positive or hopeful in the face of something so incredibly spontaneous, where you really have no idea, you don't see it coming? It sounds like there isn't really a good way to prepare. I'm sure you can probably follow a certain diet and exercise, like you said, but even then, you never know. So how in the world do you stay hopeful in the face of that?
I think everybody does it a little bit different. For me, I came to this point of acceptance with it. Like, once I accepted that it could happen and that, I was going to do the best I could to prevent it from happening, but without 100% assurance, that it still could. That really freed me to be able to live life more fully, I think. And I love engaging with this community. And I think that has also really helped me, because I know that I did a song, actually. I wrote a song about carrying the torch when one of my friends, I've lost 3 close friends this year to this. And, when my friend Chris passed, I was moved to write this song. And it's all about carrying the torch and knowing that, like, I'm going to carry your torch. Like, you carried your torch and I'm going to carry it now for you. And I know that as a community, that's what we're doing. And that just allows me to live more freely in some ways, because I know that whenever something happens to me and whenever my time is, that the efforts I have put in, the community that is so incredible, that's not going to go away. That the movement is still going to continue. The community will carry the torch for all of us together. And I think that's what really has let me live a more positive life, is just knowing that it's going to go on.
So you talk about the community. Can you give us an idea of what the VEDS community looks like? Like, what's the prevalence? Like, what do you guys do? How do you communicate and get together?
Yeah, usually we're getting together online. Last year we had a lot of opportunities in person, but this year, I think with COVID,
right,
that's not as likely to happen. And the prevalence is estimated because we know a lot of people are undiagnosed. like myself, it wasn't until I was 28 that I actually got a positive diagnosis, because not a lot of physicians are very familiar with this at all. So they estimate maybe 3,000 to 6,000 people in the United States, which is like 1 in 40,000 to 60,000-ish. Fairly rare. But I think like maybe a lot of people don't know they have it. And I think with the internet, it's really getting better. People are finding out sooner, either on their own, or, we're increasing our network of physicians so that people get diagnosed earlier and get connected with the community and get connected with the experts, which I think is a really critical piece.
I know you said you weren't a doctor, so I want to be careful here with this question. What were some of the things that you mentioned? You got online and you had convinced yourself that something's not right and you'd gone to a doctor. What are maybe 2 or 3 of those things that caused you concern that maybe somebody might want to get online and Google search for, or whatever it may be?
Sure. I have always had very thin, translucent skin, which translate to very visible veins all across my body. I get random bruises. I have very hypermobile, just like fingers, and smaller joints like those.
Yeah.
And, there were some other things that really didn't make sense that made sense later, like my facial features, which I had never thought about, other than the fact that my mom would not stop doting about my nose. Like, she just loved how tiny my nose was. And so when I was sitting down on my living room floor putting all of this stuff together, there was my nose right there on the NIH website. So there's some facial features. There's bruising, visible veins, acrogyria, which is like aging of the hands, like an aged appearance to the skin there. But not everybody has all of those things.
Sure.
For sure. I also slept with my eyes open when I was a kid. That's something that some of the parents have noticed.
Like wide open, or like
I think some
tiny
of them
bit
are
of...
wide open and some of them are just
Wow.
like cracked.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
bizarre.
It is. It's super bizarre. And then I've met people, the thing that is so crazy is I've met people who have VEDS and don't have these things. But I think bruising across the board is pretty common.
I think it's crazy to think about, of all the different things humans face. It's so bizarre to think there's a cause and effect for almost everything, but so much of it we'll never know. And how many of us go through life thinking, "Oh yeah, I sleep with my eyes open. It's fine. It's normal." Or so my hands look old, whatever. Like I was in the sun too much. Like we find a way to reason these things, and sure, sometimes no big deal, not a thing. But the more and more we get in touch with people like you and get involved in rare disease or medicine, or the community side medicine, the more I realize, man, there's a lot going on with everybody, and some things maybe we'll never know where it came from or why. And that to me is fascinating.
For sure. And that was something, I had such frequent injuries too. I tore my ACL all the way through by falling at work. and that, people say, oh, it's because you're vegetarian, or, you just need to eat a burger or something like that. And then when it all came out later, I'm like, that is not why I tore my ACL.
You're like, oh, that's all. Okay, cool. Thank you.
Yeah, I think I'm going to say that part's kind of bizarre as well, because everybody has got an opinion on how to fix that thing about you. Oh, you just need to go to bed earlier, or
totally,
whatever it may be.
Yeah.
Katie, you talked about writing a song, or some songs. Tell us a little bit about that side of your life. What are some of the things that you do besides VEDS Movement?
Yeah, absolutely. So when I was growing up, I was a marching band, total marching band nut. I marched to euphonium, which is like a small tuba, and euphonium was my life. I went to college on a scholarship, and it was my life. And I had stopped playing after college a little bit and started picking up guitar and stuff. And when I got the VEDS diagnosis, I kind of decided, maybe I shouldn't pick up the euphonium to that extent again, which was a hard decision, but it really threw me into more like a variety of musical expression. So I picked up the guitar more, I picked up my ukulele more, I started singing, and that really got me through the initial difficult, crazy time of coming to terms with this spontaneity and my mortality and all of this. And I think that has really stuck with me. I absolutely enjoy it. I love playing on the side, and it's just silly stuff. Just getting into songwriting, but I'm not I'm certainly not a professional by any means.
Do you have an outlet for your music?
Oh no. I have
YouTube?
a YouTube channel that I started before I knew I had VEDS, and I was just goofing around on. I think I have like 122 subscribers or something silly. I still don't have.
I have 12, so you're doing great.
You might have
I still haven't gotten the
123
courage.
soon.
I don't have the courage yet to do an open mic, but I'm getting there. Well, I would like to say with the music, that is something that, when I was going through this, I told people who were also going through this, I just thought about, there was so much uncertainty and emotion and devastation. And I tried to make time for something I enjoyed every day. And a lot of times that was music. And I think that really helped me remain positive, is that ability to just, okay, I'm going to set all of this stuff aside that's going on in my head, and I'm just going to focus on something else that I enjoy. And sometimes it's really hard to make time for that when you're, truly devastated. It's very hard to walk away from that devastation for a little while and try to enjoy things again. So I think it really made a difference.
Every day is going to be different in some cases. And in other cases, every day is going to feel the same. You're still broken. You're still in pain. You're still having a hard time just getting out of bed, or whatever the case may be, for all these different conditions that we have all become dear friends with, people that suffer from them. And I think the takeaway for me in that little bit is find something that you enjoy every day, whether it's listening to music or creating music or reading or just laughing with a friend or video games or whatever. It's find something you love, and I think that will help make every day a little bit better.
Yeah, when you can get lost in something like that and forget everything else for a little while, it serves as a little bit of a reset, and you can think about how to tackle everything else once again.
Yeah, definitely.
Exactly.
We interviewed Laura Bloom a few weeks ago, well, a few months ago, I guess, but she is the executive director of the Ehlers Danlos Society. So how does vascular Ehlers Danlos relate to Ehlers Danlos?
Yeah, that's a great question, and I'm glad that you brought it up. That VEDS is a subset of Ehlers Danlos Syndrome, of which there are 14 types now of Ehlers Danlos Syndrome. And I think, VEDS really fits in as this rarer type. It's not as prevalent as the more common types of Ehlers Danlos, mainly hypermobile EDS and to some extent classical EDS. And part of the reason why, we're trying so hard to give VEDS its own identity is when there's a medical emergency with somebody with VEDS, the physicians don't know a lot about it. And it's really, our bodies are much different in some ways than somebody with hypermobile EDS or classical EDS. The tissue is much more fragile. And if the medical professionals don't recognize that danger, then it puts somebody with VEDS in an even higher risk during that emergency. And I've been in situations myself where I've been in the emergency room and my vascular surgeon sent me there to make sure I didn't have a new dissection. And the physician came in and told me, you are at no higher risk of having a dissection than any other person in the population. All forms of Ehlers-Danlos are the same. And I don't really know why you're going to keep coming here. And that is really a driver behind, making this bigger name for VEDS, just to not lessen, the other forms of Ehlers-Danlos are all very important too. And they all come with their very serious comorbidities and, quality of life impacts. But in an emergency, it's extremely important that the medical professionals know the difference between vascular EDS and hypermobile EDS. And that can be said for all the forms of EDS, really. They're all different from each other. Mm-hmm. But that's really a big driver for the VEDS movement, is giving it its own identity. So I'm glad you asked that question.
It's a particular podcast episode I listened to from a group called the Entree Leadership Podcast. They're a Dave Ramsey production. And they had a guy, A.L. Williams is his name. He's upwards of 75, 80 years old now, and he gave a speech last year. And in this talk, he reminded the audience to never forget what gave you your drive. And he talked about 2 specific instances where if somebody let him down or, ticked him off or steered him the wrong direction. And that it reminds me, I'm reminded of that element when you talk about that doctor who really in that moment is helping in a way steer your course for you, because that there's probably a lack of knowledge in that advice or that pressure that really isn't fair and deserves some attention. So I love hearing that. And I would encourage you and anybody you're connected to, never forget those things. Not because that doctor's a jerk or uneducated or not cool, but because that's exactly what's wrong with this world of unknowns, which of course rare disease is. We live in that space, right? So I encourage you to keep that up and remind people you're connected to remember those instances, because like I said in the beginning, that's a conversation or a situation nobody else should ever have to deal with.
Yeah, and I really appreciate that perspective too. It's like, it's not that he was a jerk or anything. It's just that he was just not knowledgeable about it. But that is what gave me more of a drive, is like, it does matter. It is different. And no one should have to go through that. Mm-hmm. So let's make a difference.
So Katie, can you tell us or tell our listeners how they can connect with either you or the VEDS movement? Where do we find you? Where do we get involved?
Sure. You can reach the VEDS movement at thevedsmovement.org, which is VEDS, not a B as in boy, V as in vein, maybe. And we're online. We're on Twitter and Facebook at VEDS Movement. And then you can find all the podcast episodes of people with VEDS at translucentone.blog. And that's one spelled out, ONE.blog. And that's where all of my personal vlogs and podcasts and blogs are too.
Awesome. Well, we will be sure to link those in our show notes too. So for our listeners, easy way to find those there, just click on the episode notes of the show notes and we'll have those things linked there. Katie, we're so grateful for you. Thank you for hanging out with us today and giving us just a small bit of what you're doing and what you're up against.
Thank you so much for sharing and helping us get the word out about VEDS. Right. With awareness, we can find, researchers who can find a cure. We really need that kind of drive, and we have it, but we need more.
Yeah.
For sure.
Doesn't happen on its own. So
right.
Yep, and you're going to happen. Thank you, Katie.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
What a great conversation. The thing I love the most about that conversation with Katie is that she is such a self-starter. You know, the reason that she is leading this VEDS movement is because she started writing a blog. Like, she just took it into her own hands and wanted to connect with other people, and I love that.
Yep.
So, Sean, with that, we need to go into our one things. We both believe that it takes constant work every single day to get to a big goal, and that's what our one things are all about. So what's the one thing that you're going to do this week that's going to get you to a bigger goal?
Well, I've wasted a lot of time for the last, 10 months playing games on my phone. I'm thankful that a friend told me about Risk and the app for my phone. It was great while I was recovering and not working and just home all day. But now that I have stuff to do and I don't have that kind of free time, I found myself putting off important things because I have a game to win. So this week, I'm not going to open that app at all. Just one solid week at least. No games on my phone.
Nice.
Yeah.
All right. That's a simple one, but it has the potential to make a big impact, right?
That's what I'm hoping. Yeah.
All right.
What about you? Let's get real here for a minute.
Yeah, so I talked about a book in episode 113. It's called Dare to Lead. And I went back to listen to that book, and I thought I was listening to it for the second time, and it was the wrong book. So my one thing is partly an admission that I was totally wrong, and we had a conversation based on a book that was just the wrong book. I didn't. So that book is not Daring to Lead. That book is called Daring Greatly. And my one thing is to listen to that book this week so I can get back on track.
So for those of you that have been around and listened to 113 and you were like, what is going on here? Now you know why 113 was a little off.
Yeah.
Well, that actually brings me to my thank you note, and we'll wrap up with yours. My thank you note today is going out to a friend of mine and an avid listener of our podcast. I actually mentioned him in season 3 in another thank you note, but I want to say thank you to my friend Umberto because he's brutally honest, and he's not, he's nice about it, but he's honest. So when I asked him a couple days ago, like, hey, what do you think of 113? Give me some feedback. He was really nice. He said, I like this whole one thing, and of course to keep, thank you notes, that's all great. And then I asked him about the content of the main bit, and he was like, well, it was fine. But if you guys are like trying to capture the book, it didn't do that.
That's not what it was
he's
about.
read the book.
Yeah.
So I laughed, and I'm like, well, I haven't read either one. I don't know. So I just appreciated that he wasn't blowing smoke.
Yeah.
And that he was just real, and I think it helps us become better people.
Absolutely. So my thank you note is also related to this a little bit. There's an app called Libby, and it connects to your library, and you can get free audiobooks on that app. And that's what I'm going to use this week to listen to the book Daring Greatly by Brene Brown. And so thank you to Libby for providing that service. Thanks, Sean, for the awesome conversation, and we will see everybody next week. In the meantime, keep living with urgency. Thank you for listening to the Two Disabled Dudes podcast.
Find us online at twodisableddudes.com and subscribe on your favorite podcast app. Connect with us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.
Special thanks to our friend and audio producer, Jake Tompkins.